All right, I will say good morning, Shechianu, Vikimanu, Vihigiyanu, Lazmanazeh. We are Zocha today, Meres Hashem, to be able to complete the last parak of Meseches Nedarim. What an incredible, beautiful, and overwhelming accomplishment. So I will say begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Bracha Strimber, in memory, dedicating all the Shumer and Trashos this month, in memory of Avram ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah and the family in Nechama. Also, with that, let us begin. So today's daf, as I said, is Tzaddik Aleph. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem. Actually, we left off. We have a lot to do today. We left off in the middle of the Mishnah on Tzaddik Amud Beis 90b. So if you remember again, the Mishnah started by saying that Halacha L'Maisa, the Halacha L'Maisa, Barishona. Gemara talked about one of these interesting Mishnayos which teaches us about the original iteration of the halacha and then a subsequent reframing of the halacha. In the original iteration of the halacha, we see, what did the Gemara say? That if woman, there were three claims a woman could make, and ultimately, again, essentially trigger the need for divorce, but still go ahead and retain her ksuva. What were the three claims? Number one, a woman says, I was violated, and therefore can no longer remain married to you. Number two, Shamayim Beini Lebeinecha, the heavens are between me and you, which again, the Ran explained was a euphemism for claiming that the husband could not have children because his zera, his semen, did not come out with force, and therefore again, Allah Lamaisa, she wants children. This marriage can't provide her with that. And number three, Netulani Mina Yehudim. She makes a neder that she's not allowed to be intimate with any Jew, which obviously includes her husband as well. So all of these would trigger the need for divorce with a ksuva. Okay, now continuing the Mishnah. So Chazal then came back and said, isha nosenes eina ba'acher u'mekalkelas al baila. So I will say, what Chazal then became concerned about something. Now, in general, the reason why Chazal would become concerned about something is because they saw this being abused. And what did they see being abused? That a woman made these claims. Now, why did they make these claims? Why would a woman? Why could a woman potentially make this claim? Because she wants to marry someone else. But the problem is she can't get out of her marriage. So what does she do? She makes one of these claims. This way, again, the claim triggers the need for divorce. She gets out of the marriage, gets her ksuva, and then gets to go on with someone else. Now, it's interesting, by the way. So I will say, if you look in the Ran, 4 lines into the wide lines. Chazru lo mishlote isha no senes eineh ba'achram akel sawalish deshema telech lemakom shin makirin ba ubenidra v'tinase. So it's actually interesting. So the Ran actually picks up on the third case. Right? Both remember again, cases 1 and 2 have nothing to do with Nedarim. The reason why this is here in the Mishnah is because of case number 3, where she makes a neder, Netula ani mina Yehudim. I'm removed from the Jewish people. So what are we concerned about? She made this neder. Why? In order to get out of her marriage, but also she gets her ksuv because she wants to go marry someone else. The problem is, could she marry someone else? No, she has a neder. But maybe she's going to go somewhere where no one knows her, and no one knows about her neder, and she'll go out and she'll get married. And that's going to be a problem because, of course, she's in violation of the neder. The Ran is seizing on that last case because this is Meseches Nedarim. But at the end of the day, the concern is about the exploitation of any of these outs. So therefore, again, what did Chazal do in the second iteration? Chazru lomar, shelo tei isha nosenes eineh u'avachram akelkelas al baila. Therefore, they said as follows: Ha'omeres temeh ani lecha. Therefore, if a woman makes the claim that I am temeh to you, right? I was violated and therefore asura to you. Tavi ra'i ledvareha. It's not enough for her to make the claim. She has to go ahead and bring a raya. She has to bring a proof. She has to bring some type of testimony, some type of eidos that indeed she was violated. Hashemayim b'ni lebeinecha. Very interesting. If she makes the claim, the heavens are between me and you, then what happens? Ya'asu derech bakasha. Now let's say, literally means they should make it a request. Now, what does that mean? They should make it a request. So I will say this is an interesting discussion. If you take a look at the Ran, let's just go in order over the Mefarshim and look at the Ran. The Ran is 6 lines in. Yasud into the wide lines. Yasud derech bakasha mefurish b'Yerushalmi yases suuda v'yifayes. We tell the husband to make a nice dinner for her and to reconcile with her. Ve'itza tova kamash malan. and the Ran is saying it's an Eitzah Tova. They will say, okay, hold that. So the Ran says, tell the husband, take her out for a nice dinner and make up with her. Okay, that's the Ran. If you take a look at the Rush says, Yasu derech bakasha, yivakshu mimena shelo tedaber od bo. We ask her not to talk about this anymore. That's not talk about this anymore. That's the Rush. Take a look at Tosis. Tosis will say in the right hand margin, 5 lines into the wide lines. Yasu derech bakasha kilomar yivakshu mimena shelo tomar od came mishum lo mehemna. We have to say to her, don't talk about this anymore because your claim is not believed. Your claim is not believed. Now Tosis goes on. We daven for them. We daven for them. They will say the common denominator amongst all of these approaches is that halacha l'maisa, this claim is not believed to trigger divorce with a ksuva. That's what's happening over here. So again, everyone's giving a little bit of a different interpretation, but the bottom line is that halacha l'maisa, the claim is not believed. Next, netulani mina Yehudim, I am removed from the Jewish people. What happens if she makes that claim? Yafar chalka. This actually we saw already. This is actually an easy fix. This obviously again is dvarim shebeino lebeina, and therefore again the husband has the ability to annul his part of the neder. Utei misham shaso, and therefore they can have relations. Utei netula mina Yehudim, and her neder stands legabe the rest of the Jewish people, which is fine. That doesn't impact the husband. Good. So I'll say that's the 2 stages of this Mishnah. Incredible. Says the Imai Bailahu. Amr leBailat Timiani, Ma'ashadocha Truma. So I'll say follow up Shaila. Let's say the woman Rachel's married to Ruvain. So Rachel says, I was violated. Now we'll say, now remember, the Ran already kind of gave away the punchline of the Gemara, which we're going to get to. But this case obviously only comes up in a case of a Kohen. Right, because if the wife of a Yisrael is violated, she still remains permitted to her husband. This is talking about a case of an Eishes Kohen, right, the wife of a Kohen. So now the shaila is, what we've essentially established is that if a wife of a Kohen comes and says to her husband, I was violated, what do we do with that statement? Essentially, it's meaningless unless, of course, she brings some type of edus, some type of testimony to support this claim. So now the Gemara asks, what about truma consumption? So now Rachel's married to Reuben. Reuben's a Kohen. Rachel made this claim that she was violated. So now Rachel says, is she permitted to eat truma or not? Says the Gemara. So Rav Sheshes says yes, she's allowed to eat truma. Why? Because out of a concern, if we don't let her eat truma, what's going to happen? It's going to cast aspersion on her offspring. So I'll say, if we don't let her eat truma, then what are people going to say about her kids? They're going to say, oh, it must be that Rachel's kids aren't from Reuben, rather they are from someone else. Rava Amar Rava says, ino cheles. Rava says, no, halacha l'maisa, we don't let her eat truma. Why? Afshar da'ach l'chulin. Because they will say, it's fine, by the way, not every Eishes Kohen eats truma, right? Sometimes a woman is tamea, right, for different reasons. I don't mean tamea violated. I mean tamea that she could be a nida, she could be Tomas Mace. So Rava says, it's fine. In other words, people eat chulin also. Let her get by without truma, just let her eat chulin. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava, If you look at the Ran, the last line of the Ran, Efsha de Akla Chulin, this is literally the last line of the Ran. The Meimar Amri Truma Chud de Lesla. In other words, it's interesting. So what's interesting over here is Rava says, let her eat chulin. Why? Because the act of eating chulin doesn't cast aspersions on her children. Why, Rabbi say? Because if people see her eating chulin, what will people say? They don't have truma, or she's tamei. In other words, not tamei violated. In other words, see, here's what's interesting. Rav Sheshes feels the act of an Eishes Kohen not eating truma, by definition, is a statement. I will say this is such an interesting thing. The act of an Eishes Kohen not eating truma is a statement. Rava says not everything is a statement. I will say, by the way, isn't this an incredible thing? You see this today in contemporary society, right? It feels like we live in a time where every single thing you do is a statement, right? You wear this color, you do this, you say this, you that. It's a statement. And that's what Shesha is saying. Rav Shesha is saying people look at everything like a statement. So the act of an Eishes Kohen not eating truma is a statement. Rava says, I don't understand. Not everything is a statement. Sometimes an Eishes Kohen is not eating truma. You know why? There's no truma in the house. So ultimately, again, not every single thing has to be a statement. Incredible. So Amar Rava says, Umodo Rav Sheshes would agree that an Eishes Kohen should not eat truma when Shimnis Amala Sheina Ocheles. So this is very interesting. Rav Sheshes would agree that a woman who made this claim of Tamea Anilacha, once her husband dies, she should not eat any more truma. Why? Because the only reason Rav Sheshes was saying she should eat truma was why? Midi hu taime ele mishum shelo totzi laz al baneha. The only reason Rav Sheshes said that even though she made this claim, she should continue to eat truma was why? In order not to cast aspersions about the paternity of her children. However, nis'ar molav and nis'garsha, but if she was widowed or divorced, and then suddenly really is more widowed, and then she stopped eating truma, Amri hashta di'istis nisa. People will say the reason she stopped eating truma was because now she was violated after her husband already passed away. Okay, so it's an interesting machlokes. Fine. Amra Papa. So we'll say interesting case. Badik lan Rava. Rava tested us with the following shaila. Here we go. Eishes koin shenensa yesh laksuva or in laksuva. So says, now listen to this. This is great. So Papa said that Rava, when he wanted to faher, when he wanted to test the shear, he threw out the following shaila. Here's the shaila. If a wife of a kohen was violated, does she get a ksuva or not get a ksuva? That's the shaila. So we'll say, this is talking about a case over here where we know that she was, if you take a look, by the way, Rashi says it, Rashi on the left-hand side, last Rashi on the page. So Rashi says over here, Be'edim. This is talking about a case, so we'll say, the Mishnah's case was where Rachel says to Reuven, her Kohen husband, I was violated. How do we know that she was violated? How do we know? Her word. So that's where there's a concern, like what's going on over here. In this case over here, the way Rashi's understanding it over here is Rav Papa. So Rav Papa is saying that Rava tests us to find Shaila. Let's say we know that she was violated. So now we'll say, what's the halacha if the wife of a Kohen is violated? We know that she was violated. What's the halacha? They have to get divorced. So what's the Shaila? Does she get a ksuva or not? Does she get a ksuva? So the Gemara says, Kevan da'onis lagabe kohen kiratzon lagabe Yisrael dami. Now, this is very interesting. On one hand, we could say that from a halachic perspective, and again, listen to these words very carefully. From a halachic perspective, the violation of an Eshes Kohen is like willful adultery of the wife of a Yisrael. Now, I'll say, what does that mean? The Gemara is not chas v'shalom trying to equate the experiences, but what the Gemara is trying to do is from a halachic status perspective, they're the same thing. What happens if the wife of a Yisrael willfully commits adultery? And there are witnesses to this. What's the halacha? She's asura to her husband. What's the halacha if the wife of a Kohen is violated? She's asura to her husband. So from a status perspective, violation of the wife of a Kohen is the same thing as willful adultery of an Eshes Yisrael. Not equating the experiences, equating the status. And therefore I would say, Kevan donis legabe kohen kras legabe Yisrael dami in l'ksuva. I will say, what's the halacha if the wife of a Yisrael willfully commits adultery and there's a list about it? What's the halacha? They have to get divorced, and does she get a ksuva? Absolutely not. There's forfeiture of the ksuva. So maybe I say the same way that there's forfeiture of the ksuva by the case of an Eshes Yisrael who willfully commits adultery, so too that there is the forfeiture of a ksuva by the wife of a Kohen who's violated. O Dilma. Or maybe we could say like this, Matzi Amrale, let's say the wife of the Kohen could say to her husband, listen, Anu Chazina, right? The wife of the Kohen could say, listen, I'm more than happy to continue in this marriage, right? Something happened to me. I am, so to speak, fit. What's the problem over here? Tzadik Aleph from the Avos, say 91a, the Gavrahu Dinispachba Sadehu. So I will say, listen to this. Rachel could say, when Rachel, the wife of Reuven the Kohen, is violated, what could she say to Reuven? I'm fine. You know who the problem is with? The problem is you. That is a conversation that happens often in the context of marriage, right? I am fine. You are the problem. And generally it's correct statement. So I'll say, so ultimately she could say, listen, I'm happy to continue this marriage, right? So there were circumstances visited upon me. The problem is that you are a Kohen. And as a Kohen, you have an issue in terms of remaining married to me, but the problem is not me. I'm happy to remain. So I'll say, Amrin Allah. So what's the halacha? So we'll say, so this is the shaila. This was the faher. This was the test that Rava was throwing out to the Talmidim. Namely, Eishes Kohen Shenansa, wife of a Kohen was violated, and we have eidos that she was violated. Obviously, the marriage cannot continue, But halacha l'maisa, does she get a ksuva or not? Varmina lei, and we said back. So I will say, so now this is Rav Papa saying back. So Rav Papa said, we the Talmidim answered Rava. We'll say second line from the top 91a. Varmina lei masnisinhi. This is a Mishnah. It's Mefurish Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? How meres timeani lecha. If a wife said to her husband, I am timeya to you. This is the first case in the Mishnah. Yesh la ksuva. She has a ksuva. She has a ksuva. Both say, so this is my first Mishnah, right? But am I asking on what's the case? So both say this is kind of where the Ran gave away the punchline a little bit of the Mishnah. Both say, I just want to point out, in the Mishnah, remember again, in the Mishnah, when the Mishnah talks about this case of a woman says to her husband, I was violated. They will say, what doesn't the Mishnah tell us? What doesn't the Mishnah tell us? The Mishnah doesn't tell us what kind of couple we're talking about. So in other words, when we look at the Mishnah, okay, so we read the Ran. So like I said, the Ran totally gave away the entire Gemara. Right? But Lamaisa, when you read it, it's not immediately clear. We're just talking about a husband and a wife. So watch this. Now the Gemara goes through the process. So let's look at the Mishnah. A woman comes to her husband and she says, Timeani lecha. Rabosai, again, what's the Mishnah's case? No eidos. So Rachel's coming over to Ruvain and she says, I was violated. What did the Mishnah say? She has a ksuva. Rachel gets her ksuva. So where's my askinon? What's the case? Ilima be'ishes Yisrael. If we're talking about that Ruvain is a Yisrael, right? Ruvain is a Yisrael, and ultimately, again, Ruvain's married to Rachel, and now again, this is regular Yisrael couple. So then, what's the case? Ibarason. If Rachel willfully engaged in an extramarital affair, klum yesh la ksuva. Does she get a ksuva in such a situation? Of course not. V'i ba'ones, and if at the end of the day she was violated, so mika mitzra al gavra, then why do we have to talk about a ksuva? She's permitted to remain married. In other words, what's the case? If Ruvain is a Yisrael and Rachel was violated, right? If she willfully engaged in an extramarital affair, so yes, she's asur to him and there's no ksuva. If she was violated, ksuva will say only comes into play when there's a divorce. But if she was violated, there's no need for divorce. She's permitted to him. The Ella, so must see what's the case of the Mishnah. Here it is, Be'eshes Kohen. It must be that the case of the Mishnah is where Ruvain is a Kohen. Okay, so now this makes much more sense. So let's analyze this. Ibaratzon, so if Ruvain is a Kohen, and Rachel willfully engaged in an extramarital affair, so Yesh la Ksuva? Does she have a ksuva? Of course not. Mi gara me'eshes Yisrael beratzon. Would she be any different than if she was married to Yisrael? Anytime that a woman willfully engages in an extramarital affair, so it triggers the need with eidos. This triggers the need for divorce, and there's no ksuva. Elalav ba'one. So must say, what's the Mishnah's case? The Mishnah's case is where Rachel is married to Ruvain. Ruvain is a Kohen, and Rachel claims that she was violated. She was violated, and what does the Mishnah say? V'katani yesh la ksuva. And what does the Mishnah say? Ultimately, again, she gets a ksuva. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, when an Eshes Kohen is violated, it triggers the need for divorce, but she is absolutely entitled to her ksuva. Incredible. So we'll say that's the resolution of that case. Next, Ibaylo. Good. Ibaylo. Amr lebayla girashtani mahu. So say this is a very interesting case, right? Let's say Rachel shows up in Beis Din, right? Rachel shows up in Beis Din, and she comes with the following claim: Ruvain, you divorced me. Now we'll say, okay, no problem. A woman makes a claim like that. What's the first thing Beis Din's going to ask her? Where's he get? So we'll say, look at the Ran. Ran is on the left-hand side, second line down from the top. Ibaylu amra lebayla girashtani v'niskara haget o sha'avad. Mahu la mina ulatira linose. So Rabbi says, so halacha l'maisa over here, she's coming to Beis Din, she's claiming, Ruvain, you divorced me, right? We ask her, where's the get? I lost it. Now Rabbi say, now understand, there's another piece that's happening over here, which is that what? What is Ruvain saying? No, I didn't. Right? No, I did it. I think we might have had a miscommunication. No, sometimes couples misunderstand each other. Right? So I'll say, so I think we have a shtickle misunderstanding over here. I never divorced you. So she's claiming I'm divorced. He's claiming no, we're not. Beis Din says, where's your get? She's saying I lost it. Okay, so what's the halacha? Amra from Nuna. So Tashma. So let's analyze this. Tashma. So Tashma, ha omeres temani lecha. if a woman says, well, going back to the Mishnah, right? So Rachel's married to Ruvain. Rachel claims I was violated. So what's the halacha? So da'afilu l'mishnah achrona diktani lo mehemna. Now we'll say. So let's analyze this. We have two. We'll call it versions, but two stages of the halacha in the Mishnah. There's what we call the Mishnah Rishona and the Mishnah Achrona, right? The original halacha and then the subsequent halacha. What was the original halacha? The original halacha was a woman shows up in Beis Din, or she tells her husband, Timei lecha, a Naishas Kohen, right? Rachel shows up, married to Reuven the Kohen. She says, I was violated. They will say, what was the original halacha? The original halacha is she's believed, right? Her husband divorces her, and she gets her ksuva. Chazru Lomar, second iteration of the halacha was, hold up, bring edus. You got to bring some type of corroboration because we're afraid that you are exploiting a legal loophole to get your ksuva and to move on with some other guy. See, you need to go ahead and bring some type of corroborating evidence to this claim. So watch this. So the Gemara says, even according to the second iteration of the halacha, diktani lo mehemna, which says ultimately again that she's not believed just when she lodges the claim, Hasamu de Meshakra, the Yada de Baila lo Yadaba. So you will say, why were Chazal concerned that a woman would lie about Tamei Lecha? Why would she lie about it? Because her husband has no first-hand knowledge about it. And in general, again, I will say, what do people lie about? What do people lie about? Stuff that they feel they can get away with because someone else is missing knowledge. So the Chazal were concerned a woman could lie, and she could say, Tamei Lecha, I was violated. Why? Because the truth is, her husband doesn't really what is he going to say? No, you weren't. No, you weren't. He's not with her every single moment of every single day. So therefore, again, it's possible, she could say, yeah, you weren't with me. Yeah, it did happen. It did happen. Aval gabe gerashtani doesn't do this. The yadaba mehemna. But I will say, ultimately, again, when it comes to saying that she was divorced, right, she's not going to lie about that. Why? The chazaka ain't isha me'iza paneh b'fnei baila. So I will say there's a chazaka. The chazaka is a woman is not going to tell a bold-faced lie right in the presence of her husband. I will say this is not unique to marriage. In general, again, we see this concept in halacha that a person is not going to lie right to the face of someone else about a piece of information that the other could know is blatantly false. So also, you know where else we find this? We find this with the balchol, the creditor, right? That the halacha is, if I owe Reuven $100, Reuven comes and says, I owe you $100, and I say, Reuven, I owe you nothing. I owe you nothing. There's a chazaka that a borrower is not going to tell a bold-faced lie that he owes nothing in the face of his creditor. So a woman might lie. A woman might lie about being violated in order to go in and get out of a marriage. Why? Because that's a piece of information that halacha l'maisa, her husband does not know. So therefore, a person may feel comfortable lying about something that they know the other party has no first-hand knowledge about. Right? And therefore, again, However, when it comes to a get, we'll say the only way to get a get is how? The only way to get a get is how? With your husband, right? Or through your husband. She's not going to make up something like that and say that he gave her a get, when in fact she didn't give a get. And therefore, again, if she comes to Beis Din and she says, you gave me a get, halacha l'maisa, we would believe her. We would believe her. So I'll say that's one logic. So Amalei Rava, so we'll say that's Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna therefore says if a woman shows up in Beis Din and she says, we are divorced, and Beis Din says, where's your get? And she says, I lost it, or again, it was destroyed, even though husband is claiming, I never divorced you. Rav Hamnuna says, we believe her. We believe her. Because it would be outrageous. It would be outrageous for a woman to go ahead and tell a bold-faced lie about something like that in the presence of her husband. So Rava on the other hand disagrees. Rava says, Rava Amar Adraba. No, just the opposite. I feel the Mishnah Rishona Diktani Mehemna, even according to the first iteration of the halacha that said, if a woman says Timeya Ani Lecha, she is believed. Hasam Mishum Delo Abida Levazuye Nafsha. So this is very interesting. In the first iteration of the halacha, why is it that if a woman comes forward and says, I was violated, that she's believed? Why is that? So the Gemara says, it's very simple. A woman is not going to make something like that up. She's not going to make it up. In other words, that is such a degrading thing to say about oneself, that a woman is not going to make that up. She's not going to make it up. And I will say, what's interesting is, a woman won't make that up until Chazal realizes that what? that people were. In other words, remember again, the Mishnah, Rishona Mishnah Achrona, it's not the pshat that one day Chazal woke up and said, like some people think that one day Chazal woke up and said, how could we make people's life more difficult today? Judaism just does not impose enough strictures. What could we do to turn the screws a little bit? Some people think that that's how halacha works. Chas v'shalom, just the opposite. Darchei Noam. When you see something like this, you'll say, this is reactive. This is Chazal saw people were exploiting a system. So unfortunately, when people exploit a system, so then you have to go ahead and deal with that. But in the first iteration of halacha, when a woman said T'mani lecha, of course she's believed. Of course she's believed. Because in the original version of the halacha, a person is not going to say something like that, which is so potentially personally degrading. Right? A person is not going to say something like that if it wasn't true. Aval hacha, I'll say this is wild. Aval hacha, the zimnin the takef min gavra meiza umeiza. And I will say, when it comes to claiming that she's divorced, sometimes a woman would say that even if it's not true. Why not? I will say, look at the Ran over here. This is an incredible line. In the thinner lines, 4 lines in. The takef min gavra. Sometimes sha'al yidei kasa. Sometimes a husband and a wife get into such a fight, and she gets so angry. Tischazik min abal lahais panimbo v'lomar lo girashtani. I will say it is possible that sometimes in a marriage things could get so heated, and the wife could get so angry that what could she claim? I'm divorced from you. I'm divorced from you. Ultimately, again, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, there could be a concern that even though she's saying it, it's not true. It's said just out of such a profound state of anger. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, this is our overarching question. A woman comes to Beis Din, she says, I'm divorced. Husband says, no, you're not. Beis Din says, where's your get? She says, I lost it. So what's the halacha? So also we have machlokes Rav Hamnuna and Rava. So Master Rav Mishashia brought up the following case. Hashamayim beini lebeinecha. So what's that case number 2 in the Mishnah? Literally, again, a woman says, the heavens are between me and you. What's the case of the heavens are between me and you? This is where she's claiming she cannot become pregnant from her husband because his zera, right, his semen does not come out with force. So Master Rav Mishashia, Hashamay beini lebeinecha, the Mishnah Rishona, Tiyufta de Rava. So I will say, so ultimately again, so in the first iteration of this halacha, so this should be a refutation of the position of Rava, to which the Gemara says, Hacha de lesla kisufa, because there's no embarrassment for her over here. No embarrassment. In other words, she's just making kind of like a metaphorical statement. The katani dimehemda. And yet Rabbi will say what? So we'll say, Rava's whole chap. Remember, what did Rava say? Rava said in the first iteration of the halacha, the reason why she's believed in the case of T'mei Lecha is why a person would never say something that is so embarrassing for themselves, so embarrassing, so humiliating if it wasn't true. Yet I will say, take a look at the next halakha, all right? Ultimately, again, and that's why she's believed. But yet in the second case, so Shemai B'nei Beinecha, I will say, is there any embarrassment for the woman in that case? Is there any embarrassment? No. Why is there no embarrassment? Because first of all, it's not him, but also because it's a euphemism, right? In other words, it's a euphemism that's being employed over here. Okay, so first of all, not everybody learned the Mishnah on Daf Tzadik on Beis in Nedarim, so they know what that means or not. But Lamais, again, it's a euphemism. So there's no embarrassment, yet she still believed. Kasava Rava is incredible. No, Rava would hold in that case, Hasam, Kevan de lo Sagi de lo Amra, Ein Yorek Kechetz, Ilo Isekidika Amra lo Amra le. Both is incredible. Rava says, oh, no. The way the Mishnah phrases the claim is Hashamayim beini o beinecha. The heavens are between me and you. What does it mean the heavens are between me and you? What does that claim mean? That's a woman claiming ultimately what? So you have to divorce me because we can't have children, because your zera is not yoreh kechetz. So Rava says, you think all she has to say is the metaphor? She's got to say it. She's got to say that in Beis Din. And I will say, that's a pretty dramatic thing to say in Beis Din, right in front of a Beis Din. And that's a little bit, embarrassing for all parties involved in Beis Din. So there is kisufa. That's why Rava says she's believed, because Rava's whole chap is anything that's personally embarrassing. If a person's going to make the claim, we believe them to make the claim. Hashamayim beini lebeinecha de Mishnah Achrona tevet yufta de Rav Hamnuna. Rava will say the final iteration of the halacha of Hashamayim beini beinecha, where she's not believed. ultimately should be a refutation, ultimately again of Rav Hamnuna. V'ha'hacha diyadahi ubayla yadaba v'katani delo mehemna. Because we'll say this is a case ultimately again where she knows and her husband knows, right? And yet again, remember, Rav Hamuna's whole chap was anything that both parties know, the woman's not going to lie about. The only thing she's going to lie about is what? Something potentially that the other party doesn't know. Well, here is something that both parties know. Both parties know, and yet again, she lies about it, but yet she's not believed. To which the Gemara says, first wide line of us in the bottom, Kasav Rav Hamnuna, Hachanami, he gufa amri, nihi debebia yada, biyar kechetz miyada. I will say, it's interesting. The Gemara says, essentially, Rachel thinks, right? She thinks that her husband doesn't know, right? In other words, the Mishnah is presupposing that the wife assumes that only she knows how the zera, with what force the zera comes out. Her husband knows that they're having relations, and the husband knows that in the process of relations, ultimately there's ejaculation. But he doesn't necessarily know if that occurs with force. She knows if it occurs with force or not. Mishum hakim shakar. Now, she's wrong. The husband knows, she knows, but she thinks the husband doesn't know, and therefore, ultimately, again, that's why she feels the ability to lie about it. Good. So we'll say, so let's bring this all together. So we have two cases now outstanding. One case ultimately again is the case where she's claiming I was divorced. That's so what do we do in that case? But in the general we also have the outstanding Mishnah. So we'll say, so let's talk about this just a moment. Here we go. This is Hilchos Gerushin. Let me go backwards. Let's start with the Gerushin case. Hilchos Gerushin, Parakid Beis, Halacha Dalid, chapter 12, verse Halacha 4. Hiomeres Gerashtani va'avad giti. She claims, I was divorced and I lost my get. V'hu omer lo gerashticha. He says, no, never divorced you. Afa pi shehochsaka ishto hare zu ne'emenes. She's believed. She's believed. They'll say, why is she believed? This is incredible. Get ready for this. Chazaka. Ein isha me'iza paneh bifnei baila. A woman's not gonna, that would be like, I will say, it's interesting that there is like a cap to brazen kite. In other words, like there's only so brazen a person is going to be. So a woman is not going to say in front of her husband, you divorced me, when in fact she's not divorced. That's just the chazaka. Now I will say, by the way, does the chazaka mean that this never happens, that there's never be a woman who's going to lie? No, like what always chazaka means? Chazaka means that there's a presumption. The presumption tells us that things are a certain way, whatever it is. 85% of the time, 90% of the time, 75%, whatever it is. Are there outliers? Of course. So is there someone who could exploit this? Is this an exploitable system? Of course. Of course. Now you can have a woman who says, I can go to Beis Din, claim that I was divorced myself, and no one will even challenge it because the chazakas woman will never be so brazen. Okay, so we'll say, but that is the halacha. The halacha is that ultimately if a woman says gerashtani, she is believed because chazaka ein isha mi'iza paneh bifnei baila. Good. Now we'll say, I will also just tell you, fine. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's finish the Masechta first, and then if we have time, we'll come back to one other halacha. We'll say some very interesting cases over here. Really interesting cases. Hahi isisa. Really interesting cases. Hahi isisa. The chalyoma detashmish mekadna mashe yadei legavra. So we'll say there was ultimately a couple that whenever they would have relations that night, the next morning, the wife would always bring her husband like water to wash his hands. She would bring him negelwasser the next morning. Okay, beautiful. So the Gemara says, so what happened? Yom achad asile maya lemimsha. So one morning, the wife brought her husband water to wash his hands. Amar la, let's say last line of Amud Aleph. Amar la, hadam milsa lo havesa idna. So he says to her, that's so nice of you. You know, we didn't have relations last night, so thank you so much for bringing the water, but we didn't have relations last night, so let's listen to this. Amar le, she essentially says, well, I had relations, right? I had relations, right? So not exactly sure what's going on. Amrele imkain chad min hanochrim ahaluye. Like I says, pretty. Not for the Shabbos table. Not for the Shabbos table, right? Let's say, so now listen to this. So imkain chad min hanochrim ahaluye dahavu hacha idna I ant lo dilma min hon. She says, well, look, you know what? I guess it was someone else. She's telling me, I had relations with someone last night. She says, I thought it was you, but maybe it was one of the, so Ahaluye, the Ran says, the top of Amud Beis, Ahaluye Nochrim Mochre Oil. So maybe it was one of the Gentile merchants who was around, who I guess maybe pretended that he was you. But Lamais, again, I had relations with someone. Antlo tilma minhone, and if it wasn't with you, perhaps it was one of them. So we'll say, what's the shaila? What's the shaila? So now we'll say, is she believed? Is she believed? Now, once again, so let's analyze this case. Now we'll say there are two scenarios, right? If her husband is a Yisrael, then what's the impact of this case? What's the impact? None, because I will say again. Remember, having relations with someone else by mistake is the same thing as violation, right? In other words, literally, if you have a case where a woman has relations with a man, thinking that the man was her husband, it turns out that it's not her husband, that's an ones case. So if she's married to a Yisrael, it's not going to be a problem. Again, but if we're talking about a Kohen situation, then this would be a problem. So let's suppose over here that the husband is a Kohen. So what's the halacha? Rav Nachman, this is not a problem. Eina nasna ba'acher v'les ba mishasha b'mila. Rav Nachman says, no, this case sounds strange. This case sounds strange. And what we have to assume over here is that she is looking for an out from the marriage. She's looking for an out from the marriage. She's making up this story that she had relations with someone in order to get out of the marriage. I will say, but it's not just get out of the marriage. But she's looking to get out of the marriage with her ksuva. Her ksuva. Fine. Another case. Hai isisa delo hava bedicha daita bahade gavra. So let's listen to this. Here's the story. There was a woman, we'll call her, right, there was a woman who was acting in a very cantankerous fashion with her husband. She was in a very bad mood. Very bad mood. Amrle ha'idna maishna. Husband says to his wife, what's up? Right? Why you bregus? Why are you upset? Amrle me'olam lo tsa'arasan b'derech eretz ki ha'idna. She says, well, relations were very painful last night for me, so I'm in a bad mood. Amrla lo hava hada milsa idna. So he says to her, we didn't have relations last night. So Amrale, so she said, once again, I had relations last night. So Amrale im came halin nachrim naftuye da hava hacha idna. You know what? It must be that there are again some Gentile salesmen around. I ant lo dilma chad minhon. Maybe it was one of them. Here's one of them. So I'll say, so once again, what do we do with a claim like this? What do we do with a claim like this in terms of their marriage and ksuva? Once again, Amnur Rav Nachman says, Lo tashkichun ba, we do not have to pay attention to this claim. Why? No senes eina ba'acher havi. This again, I will say, so Rav Nachman l'shita, so as I will say, is based on the Mishnah. It's really, again, this is all an extension of the Mishnah Achrona, of the second iteration of the halacha. That when one woman makes a claim like this, that ultimately, again, she is asur to her husband. Again, in the Mishnah's iteration, it was she was violated. Rav Nachman says this is the same thing. It's the same exact thing. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, she's not believed without any corroborating evidence, and therefore she would remain muteras to her husband. Another case, hu gavra, to have a maharzik bebeisa, who the insisa. So we'll say another very interesting case here. There was a case, okay, so we'll say here it is. Reuven's married to Rachel. Get ready for this. Reuven's married to Rachel. Right? Reuven's out of the house. There was another guy, Shimon, who was in the house with Rachel. He was alone in the house with Rachel. So Shimon, another guy, is alone in the house with Rachel. Al Asamari Debese, Reuven came home. Parte noif luhutza va'arak. Listen to this. Shimon darts out of the house. And he runs so fast that he runs through like a wall of palm branches. In other words, so Shimon is getting out of there like nobody's business. Okay, looks a little strange. So I'll say, so Amarava. So what's this? Now, what's the Avi Shaila? So, okay, so what we have over here is some very strange looking circumstances, right? Reuven comes home. Shimon was there alone with Rachel. And the moment that Reuven comes in the house, Shimon takes off, right? Shimon takes off, running through a wall, right? So what do we make of this? Amar Rava. Rava says, it's a sharia. Rachel is permitted to her husband. We do not assume that anything illicit occurred. Im isa da'avad isura irkuse hava mirkas. Because if something had really happened, I will say, what would have happened? If Shimon really would have committed adultery with Rachel, he would have hid and not run. He would have hid and not run. The Ran points out over here, Shimon is interested in people not knowing that he's an adulterer. So therefore, again, if he would have really committed adultery, he wouldn't have run, which then exposes his identity right in public. Rather, again, he would have hid. He just would have remained hidden until it was safe to make an escape. Okay, I'll say another interesting story. First wide line. Hahu noef the alagabe dai insisa. Let's listen to this. There was a guy who was a known adulterer. Now, I'll say, this is the guy. Everybody's got to be good at something, right? So Lamaisa again, this was the guy, and this was he was known. He was the adulterer. Right? So I'll say, now what happens? So let's call him Shimon, right? So Shimon, the known adulterer, was in the house with Rachel. He was in the house with Rachel. He was in the house with Rachel. Asa Gavra. Salek Noif Isib Biklai Bala. So I'll say, now watch this. So what happens? Reuven comes home. Shimon, known adulterer, right? Known adulterer is in the house with Rachel. What does Shimon do? Well, it's great. He hides behind the curtain. Right? So Shimon doesn't take off. He hides behind the curtain. Now I'll say, now watch this. Hava mechtan tichle taman v'ta'aminon chivya. So Reuven comes home. Reuven's hungry. What does he find? There's some cress lying around. Now let's say, now it happened to be this cress, there was a snake, a venomous snake that was nibbling from the cress, and the snake had injected some of its venom into the cress. So boy, mori de beisa lemechal min ha'otechli. So we'll say, you have to imagine the scene, right? So we're Shimon. Where every good adulterer is, right? Behind the curtain, right? Sees behind the curtain. What does he see? He's peeking up behind the curtain? What does he see? Let's say, brother, you can't make this stuff up. What does he see? He sees Reuven, the husband, about to pick up some of the poisonous cress to take a bite out of it. So what happens? So below daita de insisa. So Amr Leahu Noev. So ultimately, again, Shimon calls out from behind the curtain, literally me'achori hapargid. Lo techel minhan di ta'aminon chivya. So can you imagine this? So Reuven, the husband, is about to take a bite out of this cress, and he hears a voice from behind the curtain, me'achari apargud, don't eat the cress. Don't eat the cress because the snake has nibbled on the cress. So let's say it would be interesting to see what was the aftermath of that conversation. Thank you, and what are you doing in my house, right? So ultimately, I suppose to say, now what's the shaila? So Amarava, Insise Sharia. The truth is, I will say, this interesting case, Rachel is permitted to her husband. Why is Rachel permitted to her husband? Is incredible. Im Isa da'aved isura nechale delecha balamos. So I will say, because if indeed Shimon had really gone ahead and committed adultery with Rachel, it would have been in his best interest for what? Let Reuven eat the cress. And the husband problem simply goes away. D'chsiv ki na'afu v'dam b'yedehen. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, Mal Temoju have thought, Isura Avid, V'haida Amalei Denecha, Delecha Valemos. We'll say, so it's obvious, of course. In other words, this seems to attest to Shimon's innocence, because Allah, if he really was an adulterer, the best thing would be let the husband eat the cress, just shave Yaltaza, don't do anything, and then your husband problem is gone. The Gemara says, no, I would have, maybe not. I would have thought as follows. I would have thought that Allah, Isura Avid, maybe they really did commit adultery. So if they did commit adultery, why would Shimon tell Reuven not to eat the cress? Well, it's incredible. So say, because why? Listen to this. Maybe Shimon really did commit adultery, but yet Shimon doesn't want Reuven to die. Why wouldn't Shimon, the adulterer, want Reuven, the husband, to die? Listen to this. Because Shimon, wants Rachel to remain a married woman. Why would Shimon the adulterer want Rachel to remain a married woman? The Gemara says, Mayim ginuvim yimtaku, velechem sisarim yinaim. Because we'll say, you know why? Stolen waters are sweeter. Shimon's not interested in Rachel if she's available. Shimon's only interested in Rachel. Why? Because she's with someone else. That's what makes the relationship exciting. Right? That's what makes the waters sweet. So I'll say, this is incredible. So you might have thought that Allah Maisa. Do you know why Shimon saved Reuven's life? Do you know why Shimon saved Reuven's life? Because he wants to continue the affair. and the affair is only exciting if she's married. But if now she's available, she's like any other woman. And therefore, again, the entire relationship loses its excitement. Kamash malano. Kamash malano say, as much as the stolen waters are sweeter, but lamaisa, again, at the end of the day, if the adulterer, or again, if Shimon, the serial adulterer, saves the life of Ruvain, that is a pretty good indication that halacha lamaisa, Shimon did not do anything with Rachel, Ruvain's wife. I'll just tell you in the 1 minute that we have left, it's an incredible thing that the Gemara ends off, the Masechta ends off. First of all, what a way to end the Masechta, right? In general. We'll say, but it's fascinating that the Masechta ends off with this concept of Mayim Genuvim Yimtaku. We see this concept, right? Stolen waters. We'll say, this principle is the oldest principle. It's the oldest principle of all time. Because we'll say, where's the first example we see of this? Adam Arishon. Adam Arishon was able to eat from anything and everything he wanted. Right? There's one thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, don't eat from. The Eitz Das Tovara. The one thing. And yet, the one thing Adam Arishon couldn't resist in the entire world. You could have everything. Why? Because as Chazal tell us, stolen waters are sweeter. Or in other words, I will say, when you tell a person they can't have something, that's what they want more than anything. I will say, what's the psychology of that? What's the psychology of that? The spiritual psychology, I will say, is that man is made b'tselem Elokim. Man is made in the image of God. What constraints does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have upon him? What constraints? None. There's a piece of me that wants to be fully unconstrained as well. There's a piece of me that wants to be free, and it stems from a holy place. I am made, there's a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in me. I am made in the image of the Ribbon Shalom. So the same way that the Ribbon Shalom is limitless and constraintless and totally free, I want that for me as well. What's the problem in life? We go about attaining that freedom in all the wrong ways. We think that we attain freedom by breaking down barriers, by saying that things that are prohibited should become permitted. That's the mind, we break down. Sometimes the quest for freedom is beautiful. The quest for freedom is incredible because it stems from my God-like image. My God has absolute freedom, no constraints, and I want that as well. But we look for that freedom in all the wrong ways. This is a psychology of sin. Sin makes absolutely no sense. You take out your ledger paper, you make 2 columns, pros and cons. I will say, which column always wins? Wow, that is an absolutely scary, deafening silence. Okay, allow me to provide a little bit of chinuch, right? So let's say, the cons list always wins. Why? For the simple reason, by the way, all right. For the simple reason, I will say that whatever you're going to get out of sin is limited and temporal. The cons, right, the fallout could be eternal. The fallout could literally be eternal. So the cons always win. So why do we sin? Why do we sin if it makes absolutely no sense? Because I want freedom. I want freedom. But Rabbi say, where does real freedom come from? So Rabbi say, real freedom comes from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Mishnah is in Parak Vav, Halacha Hey. Sorry, Mishnah Hey. She'ein lecha ben chorin, ela misha osek b'Torah. You want freedom? Want freedom? Freedom comes from this. Freedom comes from Torah. Because when you learn, learning allows you to engage in a self-transcendent experience. Learning allows you to discover the most incredible parts of yourself. Learning allows you to overcome your base instincts. Learning allows you to overcome your animalistic drives. Learning allows you to become something bigger and better than anything you ever could. People like to find freedom in the stolen waters, Mayim Genuvim Yimtaku. But we find freedom in Maseches Nedarim. We find freedom in Torah. We find freedom to self-actualize in our beautiful Torah Kedosha. So Rabosai, Mazel Tov on completing Maseches Nedarim. In Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow, the journey continues with Maseches Nazir. Maybe Zocha and Yirtzeh Hashem to find freedom together for many years to come. When she's for everybody, and